So I guess the most pressing career advice that I would love your opinion on and your advice on is about job offer negotiations or salary. Uh, this often actually does come up sooner in the interview process than I often expect. And
Hmm.
I'm not always ready and have my script uh, ready to talk about
Right.
salary. For example, there was an interview I went through, and first thing the recruiter asked, "What's your ideal pay range?" or "What's your ideal salary?" And then then the interview with the actual like hiring team, they asked, "What's your ideal salary?" as well.
Hmm.
There was a range posted on the job description.
Good.
Uh, and
That's good.
I just went, oh, I that range is acceptable to me to try to defer the conversation to later. But they really kept pushing, give us a number, give us a number. And I just threw in the middle of the range, which was acceptable to me. But I was hoping to, I guess, receive an offer first and start negotiating and talking about different parts, like other things beyond the salary, that could yeah, just basically like see what they would offer and then discuss from there. But they wanted me
Right.
to put something up first. And I guess, what is your recommendation, especially when you know what the range is?
Sure. Yeah. It's a hard one, isn't it? I think a lot of people find it very difficult to talk money. With that being said, it's good that they posted a range to begin with. I I want to know where your head is in terms of range. Pretty reasonable though, and I think most hiring entities are, for the most part, understanding that you're going to give a range because if you don't understand what the benefits package or the other perks of the position are, then it's hard for you to settle on a specific number. And it's interesting if they continue to push and push and push because I think the right answer is my range is here, but that is based off of me not knowing what other perks or benefits might be offered. More, vacation days might mean I'm willing to take less, or 401k, or whatever else might be as a part of the package might indicate a different point within the range that I'm willing to accept. But there's a couple of things that I want to make sure that I point out. First of all, you have to do your homework. You've got to know what the market range is for the position, the role that you're applying to. And you have to understand that, if you're applying to a very large reputable company, maybe they're publicly traded or they have products on the market, that they might be able to afford a higher salary than a smaller startup, as an example. And I'm sure that you know that logically too. But I think you could throw all that into the conversation. We do have a really good benchmarking article out there, and it gives you step by steps that help you go out and do your own homework so you understand what you should be asking for. Because if I ask you what your salary is, what your salary requirements are, I want you to be able to tell me what your expectations are. And I want it to be because you've done your homework. And you should be able to say, I feel justified in asking this, and this is why. And I think a lot of people feel really uncomfortable with that, but practice it so that you are comfortable with it. But then be open, and because you always want to leave a door open, especially if that you say, okay, well, I expect the salary range between 125 to 135,000. And if they say, well, this caps at 115, are you okay with that? I think you should, if it's a company that you're very, very, very interested in, if you still want to go through the interview process, I think it's fair to say 115,000 is lower than what I was looking for, but based off of what else might be offered in terms of flexibility and benefits and those types of things, I would still be interested in having a discussion with the hiring team. And that keeps the door open so that you can still negotiate at a later date. But yeah, you should be prepared to have the discussion. Now, if you're being represented by an agency, then have a transparent discussion with the agency, because if the agency is worth their weight, they'll have those negotiations on your behalf. But you still need to know a starting point. because it does help you to be able to negotiate at a later date. But don't lowball it. Don't give them a low number because it's hard to go up from there. It's very hard to go up from there. If you say I'm okay with 125 and then later you say, well, I really want 135, they're going to think that you're now behaving like a car salesman and you don't want to put yourself in that situation.
Hmm. Yeah, that's very true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I struggle with um if there's a range, obviously like most people will want the higher end of that range, but I don't want to just my claim that as my desired salary and then they decide, oh, you have all the qualifications, we like you, but this other person's willing to do it at our lower range. I don't want to be cut off just because they think they can get someone cheaper.
Yeah,
That's the I guess the delicate dance that
it
goes
is.
in my head with these types of negotiations.
I agree. I think that's where you have to have a really innate ability to self-assess because we have those candidates that do that. They say, we'll give them an hourly rate range of like, let's say 92 to 97. Well, for me, if you're going to ask me for $97 an hour, and I'm talking contract, but this would apply to salary. If you're asking $97 an hour, then you meet every qualification that's on that job description, every one of them.
Mm,
And if you don't, then you don't need to be asking for the top of the range. But with that being said, I still think it's fair for you to be saying, I meet every qualification on this job description. Now, with that being said, I don't know what my competition looks like, and I really want an opportunity to work with this company because. So I would be willing to be considered at a range of 95 to 97, even though I feel like I meet all the qualifications and should be at the 97 range because I'm interested in this company and the team and opportunities that this company affords. I would be interested in working, going forward in a range between 95 and 97. And that way you're putting it all on the table is that you logically understand I meet all the qualifications, so I should be able to be considered at 97. But your subtone now is stating, but I don't want to miss out because of $2 an hour or $10,000 salary or whatever it is because of my
yeah,
competition. I don't know if that
that is
helps.
that is very, very well laid out. And I wish I had this conversation before I went into the interview last week. Because I definitely wish I could have gone back and rephrased what I said there.
Mm-hmm.
As Yeah, this was very good advice, and then place it in a very, professional manner. Like
Right.
it's very professional. Like the way you laid it out would force the hiring business to understand, okay, yeah, you've done your work, you understand your value,
Mm-hmm.
but you also understand that, and then we see your interest in the company, and you'd be willing to work with us.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah. And you're being very logical too. I mean, and then they're thinking, wow, she's really thought this through. So she understands she's worth this, but she also understands that in order to again, she might have to take, a little bit of a slingshot moment, but she's willing to do that because she's articulated why this company is important to her or the role or the opportunities or, whatever it is. So now it's a little bit more of a well-rounded approach. And it can provide a huge value to you too because you still go forward. Now, with that being said, how do you think you would handle a lowball offer sometime through the process? So let's say that they go, okay, I accept the fact that the cap is at 115. You would be willing to consider that based off of everything else, the moon and the stars aligning and what have you, even though you've asked for 125. What happens if you're going through the interview process and somebody says, I'd like to make you an offer, but it's going to be 110? What do you think would be a great answer there in order to continue to progress and still be able to negotiate later?
if the benefits were good enough, then a low offer, I guess, could balance out.
It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, because I actually came across this situation last year. I wanted higher than what they were offering me, and I was trying to negotiate. Okay, are there any other benefits that can be thrown in instead to, um, sweeten the salary essentially?
Right.
But they eventually were just like, nope, we're going with someone who's just willing to accept that and flat out. Yeah,
Sometimes
I'm
that's
not.
okay though. So,
Mhm.
so, so there's three things I want to point to. If it's an actual written offer, you do have to behave a bit differently with that. But if someone does a verbal lowball, I think it's absolutely okay to not negotiate on the fly. Matter of fact, I think it's preferred. I think it's absolutely okay to say, that's a little bit lower than what I had originally requested and what I had the impression that this position was offering. And quite honestly, what the industry is paying. But I really, and again, you want to leave the door open, but I really am interested in working for your company. May I think about it?
Mhm.
No one is ever going to ethically be able to push you. Now they can still push, but now you think, now there's something wrong here if they're trying to push me. So verbal is one thing. If you get the written offer and it's low, and you're absolutely right. I mean, then you're trying to negotiate and say, but you still want to be able to have the data. This is well below industry standard, and it's well below what I came into the discussion stating that I wanted, and it's well below the range that was provided to me. And you have to be willing to walk away because now we're having a cultural discussion about the company. If they're trying to do that for you, they've just done a bait and switch. And quite honestly, I would let them hire the person that's willing to settle. I mean, I know you
Mhm.
have a mortgage payment, but you got to think long term. Are you interested in negotiating with a company that has now lowballed you when you were clear and they were clear up front and the dollar figures were much higher and now they're giving you a much lower and they're not willing to really give too much? I would be okay walking away with that because that to me, and Becky, keep me honest what your thoughts are, but that to me means that future raises, future bonuses, I mean, are they going to be flexible with your schedule? I mean, I think it opens up a whole cultural discussion in an environment that you may not be comfortable with because they're penny pinching.
Yeah,
I
that's
would
true.
agree.
Yeah.
It kind of soils the
Mhm.
relationship from the get-go. Now, I'm going to ask this on Pauline's behalf or anybody else's behalf if they're interested in knowing what happens if they give you just the very lowest of the range. It's still in the range, but it's like the lowest of the range when you have all the qualifications that you have said, I have all these qualifications. I'm looking for the top end of the range, but then they just come back and they offer you the lowest within the range. So ethically, you're still on the same page. Would you handle that any differently, Angela, or would that be a similar situation?
I think it goes back to what you requested to begin with, which is why you've got to be very firm with what you're requesting to begin with. In the extent to where we just talked about is that I believe I'm worth 125,000, but I understand your cap is 115, but based off I would be able to consider it. But if the range is, let's say that the range is 105 to 115 and they offer you 105, I would say the same thing. I know that I'm worth the cap or higher. I'm not willing to accept 105. And there's a time to where I think it's okay to not even try to negotiate. It leaves it to them to come back and make you another offer. And I get it. I understand it's an employer driven market, but I think engaging in employment opportunity is like marrying someone. You want to be happy with your offer and they need to be happy with you joining them. And if there's not a mutuality there, then I think you should walk away. And sometimes walking away is going to be your best bet because what you don't want to do is take 105 whenever you know you're worth 125, but the cap was 115. And then 2 months down the road, you see this perfect job opportunity for exactly what you were looking for, and now you've got a different choice to make. And I know
Yeah.
it's tough because you got to feel, okay, how am I going to cobble together my bills in the meantime? But I think you got to look longer term if you can, and
Mhm.
walk away if you feel like you need to walk away.
Yeah,
Now,
because in that scenario, then your risk is that you're tarnishing your brand if you bail after 6 months with this company or whatnot. If you accept the offer that you're not super happy with, and then the more
mhm.
attractive one comes along, then you run the risk of tarnishing your brand, that you're sort of we call it a flight risk, that you're bopping from job to job because this one then suddenly was the shiny thing that met everything you wanted,
Yeah.
which was great. But to Angela's point, I think it's better to walk away from the first one when it's not what you want and hold out if at all
If
possible.
possible.
If at
Yeah.
all possible, yeah, for the next one. And that way you don't hurt your employment timeline and that stick-to-itiveness that every company is looking for.
Because recruiters and hiring managers will ask, why did you leave this company? Well, because I accepted an offer that was lower than I wanted and I received it. I mean, there's no way that you're going to be able to phrase that puts you in a good light. There's just not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you do have to look long term as well.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of look at opportunity costs of the decision.
Yep, exactly.
Now I'm going to turn the question on its head.
Okay.
On the other end is you're going through another kind of interview and they ask for your rate. You throw something out there and they accept it without blinking an eye. Now my husband has told me if they accept it without asking anything else, pushing back or anything like that, you've priced yourself too low. Is that valid?
I don't agree with that. If you're in alignment, especially if it's a rate, an hourly rate, if you're in alignment with the market rate and they've asked you what your market rate is and you're in alignment with it, then they shouldn't be blinking an eye. If they are, then they're a sleazy car salesman. One of two things have happened if they do push back is either you've over marketed yourself or they're a sleazy car salesman. Let me explain, especially if it's a recruiting agency. So the way that recruiters work is for permanent placements, we get a percentage of your base salary, and it's usually somewhere between 20 to 30% of your base. So it behooves us to get you the highest salary possible because we get 20 to 30% of it, depending on what the contract is. We only take 20%, but there are some agencies out there that take 30. So it's going to make a big difference for me to try to get you 125,000 versus 115 because our piece of the pie is bigger that way. Okay. So no, but that's different than contract. So the way contract works is there's a bill rate and a pay rate. Now, a lot of firms will try to negotiate the candidate as low as possible because the bill rate is still the bill rate and they're trying to get a bigger margin there. We don't. We have a flat markup on our bill rates too. So we're very transparent. We tell the candidate and the client what the markup is. It's flat across the board because we want to pay you a market rate and then we want the client to understand that you're being paid well, and it helps to lower our attrition. That's why our attrition rates are in single digits. But with that being said, if you come to me and you're looking for a contract CRA position and you tell me I want $125 an hour, I'm going to tell you that we can't work together because that's well above industry standard. I'm going to push back. So that just means that you've asked me for something well out of the market range. Now, on the flip side, if you tell me you're okay with $70 an hour, now I'm going to be scrutinizing your credentials, thinking she's fraudulent or desperate. And neither one of those situations are good because recruiters scare easily. I want you to stay where I put you. Right. So what I'm looking for is you to give me a market range, one that makes sense. If it's oncology, it might be this range, cardiovascular, maybe that, but it needs to be within a range that's reasonable. And if you do give me a range that's reasonable, I'm not going to push back. I'm going to say, well, okay, that's perfect. Because everybody has their own range. Now, I might tell you, you know what, I can see where you would get that range, but the client's capping at this, but it's not a pushback. It's just a standard discussion. But now sleazy recruiters will go, can you go as low as 50? Now they're still going to bill the client 125 or whatever, but they're going to take that big chunk out of the middle. So if you're getting pushback from a recruiter, it's either because you're out of range or because they're sleazy. Okay. The key is that you need to know what your rate range should be and stick to it. And then if the recruiter comes back to you and says, I can't pay that because the client's budget is this, small startup, this, that, or the other, now you just have a discussion with them and it makes a lot more sense. So now corporate recruiters kind of the same way. They should be posting the ranges, but they're told, and they don't make any extra money off placements, corporate recruiters. You're dealing with a recruiter at Icon. That's a corporate recruiter. So not like an agency like us.
Like an in-house.
Yeah, exactly. And so you're dealing with them and you say my hourly rate is 92 or 95 and you've done your homework and you know that's industry standard and they go, okay, that just means that you're meeting their expectations and there's no argument. That's a good thing. It's actually a positive thing. So,
Okay. All right. That's good to know. And thanks for
yeah.
the insight about how the recruiter or the agency works. Like obviously I know that you have to take some kind of cut somewhere when you bring a candidate to the sponsor. But it's better to understand like okay, bill rate, pay rate, markup, and things like that.
Right.
Um, let me see. Yeah, it's interesting because like I definitely have been seeing changes in the ranges for CRAs across the board. I mean, there are some postings there where they're like, oh, we're looking for someone between $30 and $50, and you're like, oh wow, that's really low. And then some that are upwards of eight 60 to 70 and then 80 to 90 for different levels. But I've even seen some CRA 2 or 3 or senior CRA roles where the job range is like 50s to 70s. And I'm like, well, that's kind of low for that level. uh,
Yeah. Could depend too whether or not it's a W-2 or a 1099.
hmm
The W-2 ranges can afford to be a little bit lower because you're not having to worry about some of the overhead and the burden rate as a 1099 would have to.
hmm
Um, but yeah, the third, well, there's also different CRA titles. So there's a lot of companies that call their coordinators clinical research associates, and coordinators 30 to 50 range is absolutely valid. If you're going to go work at the
hmm
University of Maryland or Mass General or somewhere like that as a CRA, but it's really dealing with patients, then that makes a lot of sense. Sometimes you have to dig into what the company is, who the company is, and what they're doing. And we do have some clients that lowball them. We just don't work with them because I'm not interested in dealing with someone on the client side who's not willing to pay market. And the reason
hmm
why is because now they're going to deal with attrition. I mean, now we're going back to that. Would you take a $105,000 offer when you know you're worth 125,000? Okay, well, when the real offer comes with another company at 125,000, you're going to bail. Well, it's the same thing as
Yeah.
contract, but it's harder to prove leaving contracts because of better offers because contracts by the nature of the beast are short term. So it's like all you have to do is say the contract ended. Okay, well that's not a lie. It did ended. I just terminated it because I got a better offer. But you can leave that part out, and it's a little bit
hmm
more elusive. So when we have a client that says I only want to pay X, and X is well below industry standard, we don't take that client on because it harms our brand if we're recruiting below industry. And so know what your industry rate is and stick to it. And
hmm
one more thing I would note is if you're going to work as a contractor directly for a company versus through an agency, realize that those ranges might be slightly different. So, for example, if you're going to work as a 1099 contractor for Icon directly versus coming through us to get placed at Icon, I'm going to have to offer you a little bit lower because I got to upcharge mine because what they're paying is what they're paying.
Yes.
The difference would be is now you have a relationship with us so that when the icon, as this example, ends, I'll just roll you over to somebody else.
hmm
So, but if you're involved with an agency that you trust, then you can have those very clear and candid discussions and feel comfortable about the rate range that's being offered.